Welcome back. On Tuesday this week, Kung Kao Po, the newspaper published by the Roman Catholic Diocese of Hong Kong, announced the death on 24th of April of Leo Goodstadt. Leo was a devout Catholic, an economist, journalist and writer. He was also the first head of the Central Policy Unit, founded in 1989 to provide strategic advice to the government. Over the years, the Pulse spoke to Leo Goodstadt several times. One of his major concerns was the plight of Hong Kong's neediest groups.
Welcome, and it's my pleasure to introduce you this week to Leo Goodstadt, a writer and economist, and incidentally, a Welshman.
For part of the time, for example, I lived in a tenement block in Causeway Bay, and I think the experience of having done that as a raw young man the first time in the Far East is something that was enormously valuable, way in which people overcame their fear of this alien youngster. People who'd never seen a foreigner to talk to before, I thought was remarkable, and the kindness of people too.
Leo Goodstadt arrived in Hong Kong as a Commonwealth scholar in 1962 to research housing issues in the then colony. 2 years later, he joined the University of Hong Kong as a lecturer in economics. From 1966 to 1976, he was deputy editor of the Far Eastern Economic Review, which covers business and political news in Hong Kong, mainland China, and across Asia. Although Leo Goodstadt grew up in one of the poorer parts of Wales, he felt that the sense of community there helped ameliorate the worst effects of poverty. On first arriving in Hong Kong as a researcher, he quickly became aware of a keener sense of powerlessness among grassroots people.
You've talked a bit about Hong Kong's problems as you've seen them firsthand, but to be able to actively to do something about them, mainly in the form of writing. You actually joined the Far Eastern Economic Review.
I don't, in fact, share the ordinary view that most journalists have, which is that your writing changes the world. And for a journalist simply to write, here is a problem, the government must do something about it, is an entirely negative and eventually totally frustrating experience. And I think, therefore, that all the thousands, hundreds of thousands of words possibly I've written on Hong Kong, I'm sure that the vast majority of them have been like water off a duck's back.
In 1989, on the establishment of the Central Policy Unit, Leo Goodstadt was appointed its head. Up to the 1997 handover, he led the unit in advising governors from Sir David Wilson to Chris Patten. Joseph Chen was a member of the Central Policy Unit from 1991 to 1992.
The Central Policy Unit was very much Leo's brainchild. He was the mastermind behind the unit. He was the guiding force behind the entire spirit, and you might say that he represented the Central Policy Unit.
He worked very hard. He was a very, very disciplined person. He usually got up very early. When I was with him at the CPU, at the Central Policy Unit, he probably got up every day slightly before 6 a.m. Then he went to Mass, and then by the time he came back to the Central Policy Unit at 9 a.m. for morning prayers, for daily instructions for his staff members, he usually already had 2 breakfast meetings.
Leo certainly was an extremely intelligent man, and he had an outstanding understanding of Chinese politics, Hong Kong politics, and how the Hong Kong government worked. He commanded a lot of respect among journalists and also among senior business leaders in the territory. I certainly learned a lot from him. I treated him as my mentor. I learned and benefited from his many insights, which I certainly could not have acquired from books.
So Hong Kong's poverty today is quite special, quite different from the past. Our poverty is the result of bad policies.
Goodstadt authored several books on Hong Kong, including in 2013, Poverty in the Midst of Affluence, How Hong Kong Mismanaged Its Prosperity. He was firmly convinced that poverty, which has in some ways worsened here, could have been reduced if not for bad or short-sighted government policies, as he explained on the Pulse.
We have a new kind of poverty in Hong Kong, something that we hadn't expected, something we hadn't seen before. And we can begin with by talking about the elderly. We have an aging population. And what we didn't realize 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when we had the time to prepare for it, these people, when they retire, have no pensions. So they have to live on means-tested Social Security, CSSA. And that means a very large number of people. We're talking about hundreds of thousands. But there's also a new kind of poverty in the sense that what we used to provide either very cheaply in the public sector or for free, like excellent education, secondary school education, and excellent hospital services, we're now charging for and price rationing in a way that we never did in the past, so that we get people with serious diseases like cancer who find themselves becoming impoverished as they try to pay for the treatment, the best kind of treatment, which they believe they could get either in the private sector because of queuing times in the public sector, or because the drugs are not being supplied free of charge in the public sector. And you get families then struggling with children who've got disabilities and who need early intervention programs to ensure that as they go through the school system, they have the capacity to take full advantage on the same basis as any other child. Those early intervention programs are defective, they're not sufficient to meet all demands.
In 1997, Tung Chee-hwa became Hong Kong's first chief executive. By the time of Tung's 8th policy address in 2005, it had long since become apparent to many, including Leo Goodstadt, that there were many unresolved contradictions in his governance.
The devil is always in the details, so he talks about doing things for the poor. We're not told what poor actually means, but a bigger problem than that is, he says that we have poor children, and so those under 6, he'll help the parents. How will he help the parents? With educational activities, health and counselling. But these are needy people. What they should have is more money. Then you get to the next group, the children in school. And again, there's counselling. There are to be mentors. They're to be given a more positive attitude towards life. But he said they're needy. Their problem is money. So if you're not prepared to put money into their hands, with the best will in the world, you can't solve the problem of being needy. Mentoring doesn't solve it. Artificial ways to make you think positively about a world in which you're dispossessed or underprivileged won't work. So, you know, his difficulty is mismatch. You can't have good governance unless you have joined-up government.
The mismanagement of Hong Kong governance, particularly since the handover, was a subject much in Leo Goodstadt's thoughts. In his final book, A City Mismanaged, Hong Kong's Struggle for Survival, published in 2018, he explains that the SAR's well-being and future survival had been endangered as a result of deliberate decisions made by chief executives and gross policy mistakes that they were extremely reluctant to reverse. When she took office in 2017, the fourth chief executive, Carrie Lam, did acknowledge that policymakers were out of touch with public aspirations. Leo Goodstadt, however, was wary, saying that as director of the Social Welfare Department in 2000, she had set about reforming its management and funding and created the impression that the department's services merited only a low priority in Hong Kong's annual budget. He also felt that she had left a powerful legacy that has potentially shaped policies for years to come.
He believed that the Hong Kong government had a lot of financial resources, that the government could do much more for Hong Kong people by spending the money wisely. And he disagreed with the so-called mentality of the Carrie Lam generation of administrative officers and those before her, who always wanted to balance the budget, who always wanted to accumulate fiscal reserves without any definite plan of spending the reserves for the long-term benefit of Hong Kong people. Leo was a model concerned citizen. He really cared about Hong Kong. And he not only cared about Hong Kong, he was careful enough to listen to the views of different groups of people to enhance his understanding.
Good governance should be about caring for the people who need the government most, the needy.